Thank you again for joining us today for another one of our webinars. We have a little different take on something today than we often do. But before I get started, just want to say that first, thank you all again for joining us. And for those that may wind up watching this later on the recording, today, as we are in Maryland in a bright, beautiful, sunny day, Hurricane Milton is bearing down on the central west coast of Florida with tremendous power. They say one of the strongest hurricanes yet. It's just been incredible to see that. And we have clients down in the area that's pretty much in the bullseye of where they're headed. We have friends down in that area. We have team members who live in the Tampa area and Sarasota area. And to all those in the storm's path, we wish you all the best, and may tomorrow and the next day all be safe and sound days to you all. All right, as we get in, just a reminder, we welcome your questions throughout, meaning you can pose questions as you think of them, and we invite you to do that. We will hold the questions until the end. Our goal is to wrap up the presentation part by 1 at the latest, if not a little bit earlier, and then go into the Q&A portion of the webinar. So just a reminder, please put your questions into the Q&A part of the control panel for Zoom and not the chat. That's where we're going to be looking at them to get them. Plan for today, as I said, it's something a little bit different. Marketing firms, of course, they always like to talk about their success stories. We're the same as everybody else. And a lot of times the success stories are about, well, we came in and we saw this and we did this, and that was the result. But there's an awful lot more to an assessment than the one-sided view that an agency brings to it. There's the whole client side. How do they make a decision that it's time to bring someone in from the outside to take a look at this? And how do they respond to the process of somebody, looking under all the books and all the tables and everything, and, doing that deep dive into all the marketing? And then what do they do with the recommendations from that? And not all the time does the marketing firm like us go and implement everything. So our story today is about a client that we worked with several years ago, that they took the recommendations, they had the courage to bring an outside set of eyes to begin with, and then they took the recommendations and they implemented them. So we're today sharing the story of Episcopal SeniorLife Communities out of the Rochester area in New York. And with us today is Courtney McGinness, the VP of Marketing and Community Engagement. And Courtney, I'll begin and end later by thanking you very much for all the time you've taken to help us with this, your willingness to share your experiences and the good and the bad of what came out of the assessment process, and just what that whole experience was like. That's our goal. And Courtney, could you take a minute and introduce yourself to our audience today?
Sure. I am so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I am the Vice President of Community Engagement and Marketing for Episcopal SeniorLife Communities. I have been here for quite some time, almost 24 full years. I love my role here, and I'm just looking forward to sharing our story today, and I hope it's helpful.
All right, thank you. One last note before we jump forward. One of the most common questions we often get is, towards the end of a presentation is, hey, can I get a copy of the presentation? So again, just a reminder for the veterans of our webinar series, and FYI for those of you who are new with us today, that we are recording the session, and everyone who's registered for it will receive a link to be able to watch the recording. We encourage you to share it with others if you think they're helpful things that you've learned here today. So yes, everyone will get that at the end of the webinar. So there's a theme that's going to carry through what we're going to talk about today, and that's it's never one thing. Lots of times, clients may think that, okay, we have this challenge, what is that one silver bullet what is that one thing we need to change to increase census to solve this problem? And it virtually never is as easy as that. It's really looking at a combination of factors and how they all play together to support a sales and marketing program. So as Courtney shares her story today, you're going to see a lot of different factors that came into play, and how, by focusing on all of them, she and her organization were able to significantly increase census. Um, so Courtney, if you will, could you start off, just introduce our audience today to Episcopal Senior Life Communities?
Sure, of course. As you can see here, there's a map of our programs and services. But to provide a little bit more context to that, we were founded in 1868, actually. Our nursing home, the Episcopal Church Home, has more than 150 years of experience in the Rochester, New York market area. Over time, we've grown into Episcopal SeniorLife Communities and continue to be a faith-based, not-for-profit organization that is dedicated to understanding the needs in the community and responding. We often say when we are describing our organization that our intent is to fill in the gaps by creating programs and services for people who fall through the cracks. Today, we serve about 1,500 older adults each year with about 650 staff members, several hundred volunteers across 9 campuses and community programs, and mainly focus in 3 areas: health services, which include our skilled nursing, rehabilitation, assisted living, and memory care communities and programs; affordable housing. So we have a housing service line with affordable housing, independent living, and patio homes. And also more recently, community services. We have a nursing home transition and diversion waiver program, also supportive housing services, and health and wellness programs. Of course, today we're going to be mainly focused on our occupancy in our independent living and assisted living programs, but I just thought it was helpful to get a sense of who we are as an organization and the breadth of programs we have.
All right, great, thank you. And so maybe a little more look into what we're going to dive into.
Sure, absolutely. Here we are. As you heard, we have been a growing and strong organization for many years. Things were rolling very smoothly, as smooth as they can be in a service organization, until about March 2020, where the great disruptor hit all of us. So I'm sure that this occupancy chart does not look completely unique to everyone on the call, to everybody on the call after 2020. I think some people did better, some people did worse, and those that were not affected by what happened to us with the pandemic in 2020, that's a fantastic thing. But I think this is probably pretty traditional. So where we saw the fluctuations in occupancy really after the aftershocks of COVID happened were in 2021. This is kind of laggingly what happened. We were not able to increase our pipeline, but also had to continually deal with attrition. We were able to gain ground more swiftly in our independent living communities over time. And assisted living, I think, being a more variable, volatile market, had a few dips along the way, but is increasing more and more and on its way to being a stabilized program from an occupancy standpoint. We had 3 communities that are the main drivers of our lower occupancy. You can see here, there's a River Edge Manor, Pinehurst, and Brentland Woods that dipped very low in occupancy in 2021. So again, it's that delay from 2020. And this is the point where we said, uh-oh, we don't know, is this a blip? Is this COVID response? Are we felt like at that time also, we're in a really bad place. This is kind of our rock bottom. We need help. Little did we know, it wasn't.
And just want to point out a couple of things here. We
Hmm.
started work with Courtney and her team late in 2021, right around the November, December timeframe. And we wrapped up our report and recommendations early in 2022. So right around this area covered by that rectangle. And the other thing I want to point out that we will come back and talk more about later is you see here that both Pinehurst and Brentland Woods started picking back up fairly soon after that assessment time period. But River Edge Manor continued down a little bit further before they came up much stronger. So there's some unique things about River Edge Manor that we're going to share a little later in today's conversation.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned a couple of things in what you were just saying, but obviously you were looking at this, you were seeing it over time. You obviously had to be doing some things to try and address it. You
Hmm.
weren't sure if it was a blip or something, but eventually you got to a point where you were ready to look outside for help and reach that point that, well, just tell us about that decision, if you would.
Sure. I think it has a lot to do with what you said a few moments ago, in that it's never one thing. And if it were one thing that we needed to fix, then it would have been very easy. But the fact that there were a lot of different contributing factors to our lower occupancy became very overwhelming. We were really in a deep hole. So, outside of startups, we had never had to fill so many apartments. And it really was just a daunting task. In addition, it wasn't just us. So there were many of our competitors were also looking to increase their census. So it was a highly competitive market. Now is the time that we really need to make a statement in the market, in the outside market, and certainly felt like we needed some help there. Also, internally, when there is census or occupancy pressure, sometimes it can cause friction and competition and siloing within the programs. And we saw a little bit of that in some of our communities, a little bit of that dysfunction that can come along with friction and pressure. And that's something that needed to be addressed. And we felt like we could benefit from working with an agency or getting some outside help. Also, it was clear that the organization, we all in 2020 were in survival mode. We were looking at the day to day, just trying to get through. In 2021, we started having to really think, how do we have to continually innovate and get stronger. And that is a shift. That really was a shift for many folks. And we felt like we could use some help with, where do we start with that? Where do we need to innovate? Where do we need to get back to things that we have done in the past, where I think we could admit that in COVID, we got into some probably not so great habits because we were just focused on other priorities. So those are some of the main reasons that we said we really needed help. And ultimately, it comes down to, we are all so emotionally invested in what it is that we're doing here. We needed a objective viewpoint and a different perspective. I think in many ways, I knew, at least for myself, that there's such a thing as being too close to being able to kind of find your way out of something.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. The next step was, okay, you reached that decision. How do you go? You're part of the senior leadership team of Episcopal Senior Life. How do you approach that? The other members of the senior leadership team and CEO and so forth. And once you get to that point where you're open to it, how, from that overall leadership perspective, did you run into any roadblocks or are there any particular challenges with being able to move forward from that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we certainly did. There were some obstacles and some things that we really had to have some thoughtful consideration around. As a senior leader, I led the marketing effort here for, as I said, about 24 years, coming really very close to that. And I started to think about whether or not my longevity was, which is typically, I think, something that's very positive, was beginning to become an obstacle for us to move forward. I have a lot of experience with this organization. I know it well. I know our culture well. I've been very successful here. However, with this new challenge, significant challenge, I had to come to terms with I needed to be open to new and different perspectives. And most certainly, the world is not the same. And what we did before COVID was likely not going to get us out of the rut that we are in today. So I think that one of the biggest obstacles, and the first obstacle that I had to get over, was I had to get over myself. I had to say, you need some help, and be big enough to ask for it. So, and that's easier said than done, because it's a pretty vulnerable place to go when I'm going into my CEO's office and saying, and those around me, my peers who are vice presidents of the service lines, to say, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure where to start. And it was a savings grace when I thought, when I came to the realization that, yes, let's go outside the organization, it was a it was a real helpline. I really felt renewed by that revelation that there's help out there for us. So that was my first obstacle. Once I talked to the CEO, who is an amazing person here and very, very supportive of the entire organization, she was on board and she said, yes, absolutely investigate this and let's move forward. I think it's a great idea. So on I went. It wasn't all that smooth sailing. Everybody wasn't, really excited at first. So there were some reservations as I rolled this out. When I rolled out to my own team that I was going to have an agency come in and work with us on doing an assessment, that's one thing. I have some purview there. I have super close relationships there, and those folks get it. But there's also the programmatic side and the operational side where I'm saying, we're going to do an assessment in your space as well. And whether or not you were in a marketing function or the operational function, there was a few factors that I think led to some reservations. Number one, the time factor. Again, people have a lot of different priorities, and this does take some time. We had to set time aside. We had to prepare and understand what we want. So there was that reservation of how are we going to get this work done. Through talking where we could come out of this, we all understood that the time was very much worth it because occupancy had to be a major priority for all of us. Of course, the cost factor. There is not only a cost to the assessment, but the assessment is likely going to generate more ideas for further cost or more initiatives for further costs. So that was there were some reservations there. And I believed that this was such a positive initiative working with an agency that I actually felt like it's not that we can't afford to not do it. We have, as evidenced by the charts that you saw, we were on a slippery slope and we needed to do something new and different. The perception factor was there. We had never worked with an agency before. You had this idea of they're going to come in and they're going to tell us they don't know us and they're going to tell us this is all the things that you should do. No offense, Rob, that they are going to think that this is what you should do. It's not going to really pertain to us. And great, we're going to have a plan that's going to sit on a shelf and it's not going to help us. And it's all going to be a waste of time. So my rebuttal to that was that we are not looking for someone to come in and give us a cookie cutter plan. We need to understand what we want and work with potential partners here that understand us and where we're trying to get. And also, if we have a plan developed and it sits on a shelf, that's our fault. We need to be serious about where we're trying to get to and accept the help from experts. Then finally, the fear factor. It's not easy to have someone come in and look through your programs. And there's a fear that you're going to be told that everything you're doing is wrong, or your warts are going to all be exposed in your communities and in your programs. And the positioning of it is, and we were looking for an agency to come in and recognize our strengths and where we could grow within those strengths. And I let people know we are doing a great job. We're a great organization. We have a great reputation. We've been very, very successful. We're experts here as well. This is a partnership with whomever comes in to help us out here and do an assessment. But make no mistake about it, they are going to see some things that we need to be doing differently, or that they recommend that we are doing differently based on the success that they have seen in their expansive experience in doing this with multiple organizations. And I'm in it too. I'm putting my heart out there as well. So trying to lead by example to let people know it's okay. And finally, they are going to look at what we could do better and differently. And that's what we want. Because if we knew how to do things different and how to get out of this hole, we'd be doing it. We're asking for help intentionally. And I think that is really, that's important that people know that. And if you all came into our communities and said, gosh, you guys are nailing it, you're doing everything just perfect, we don't have any recommendations, you'd be in real trouble then.
Right. All right. Thank you. I think there's some great words of wisdom within all that for anybody that might be sitting on the fence wondering, should I do this or shouldn't I? So before we move into any of the specific recommendations, how you implemented them, are there any words of wisdom you would have for anyone else out there about that process you went through to actually bring in and choose who to bring in?
I don't know if I'd categorize anything I say as words of wisdom, but I can certainly give it a try. I think we had a good process. I started out by asking friends and colleagues in the community that I respect about agencies that they have worked with and processes that they've gone through, if they've worked with agencies, to get some recommendations. And I did get a few. I did some online research myself and narrowed down to interviewing 3 different agencies with a few things in mind. Number one, ensuring that they had documented success in helping organizations increase their census. Obviously, that's the point here. This is what we're trying to do. But also, the way in which the agency operates was extraordinarily important to us because of all of those fears that I had just mentioned. The people who were going to be here and on site needed to be personable. They needed to be genuinely interested in our organization, in us as people. And I wanted to feel comfortable with that and the culture, values of the organization that we were working with. Finally, when I narrowed it down, I did ask for references and called clients, and to ensure that what the agencies were telling me matched with what the client's experience were. And I felt like that was really helpful, and it just continued to fuel my thought that this was a good idea. And that's how we came to Love and Company.
And thank you again for the opportunity. We've really appreciated it. Um, so before we move to the next section, I just want to share, I think there's several commonalities with what Courtney and her leadership team experience. It's what we often see in communities. Lots of times the teams in communities, they feel like we've tried everything. We've done this, we've done that. We just we're not getting there. And then there's that frustration with what's happening. And as Courtney said, that fear, that understanding that maybe I'm just too close to it. I need another set of eyes to come in. And, that willingness, that courage, as I said earlier, to say, hey, I can't do it alone. I need help. That's so hard for so many of us in all facets of life, not just this, to ever admit, I'm not getting there on my own. I need to ask for help. And you also mentioned the importance of that third party credibility, where it's not just Courtney saying that something needs to be done. You've got that the credibility of that third party organization behind you on that. So those are a lot of commonalities that we see when we start the assessment process that some of our listeners today might be wrestling with those things. So okay, let's delve into some of the specific findings from the assessment and what you did to address them. The first area was the first that we'll talk about, not necessarily in priority order, but the
Mhm.
overall flow of leads was low. You
Yes.
simply were not getting, in some of these communities in particular, the number of opportunities to engage with potential residents to ever reach your sales goals. So we made some recommendations on things that could significantly increase lead flow. I know you took that in a little different direction, but still with that focus on generating leads. So talk to our group here. Share a little bit about how did you approach that? How did you go about that?
Sure, sure. Yeah, very clearly we needed to provide our senior living consultants with who are our salespeople a bigger pool to be successful in their roles. And when they're successful in their roles, the program is successful as well. Um, we had a a marketing strategy that I think for all intents and purposes needed to be updated. Again, we have 9 different properties, 9 different campuses throughout the Rochester area. And our strategy was heavily leaning into traditional media and doing so with an organizational message. So, promoting Episcopal Senior Life Communities in its entirety versus having marketing and advertising campaigns that were directed at individual communities. So the recommendation was that we look at that a little bit more deeply and really lean into that. And more specifically, lean our marketing dollars or redirect our marketing dollars to the underperforming, um, communities, which in hindsight seems obvious, but to really focus on those communities, step away a bit from the traditional media, traditional advertising methods, and lean more into things like direct mail pieces and digital presence. And throughout the 3 communities, we did that. River Edge Manor, that we're going to talk a lot about here, use as kind of our case study, is a good example of throughout the assessment. Joan and Tim came here and did the assessment. They did a great job. And we all kind of struggled with what is the identity of River Edge Manor. So it's really hard to go out into the community and promote leads and generate more leads if you don't have a strong message or don't really, what is your value proposition of why people would come to River Edge Manor. So we had to dig deep into the program at River Edge Manor, have conversations with family members and residents and the staff there, and look at what is it that makes us special? What makes us different than the community that's a mile and a half down the road from here? And we came up with a few different things. We are a small community, it's 49 units. And years ago, we really thought about it as a boutique type of hotel. We've kind of lost that in the way that we were operating. So we paid attention to that and said, what does that look like? What are the niceties that make that a special proposition for River Edge Manor? You know, the Times Union, or excuse me, the New York Times in the living room, the flavored water, the little niceties that you might expect in a boutique style of living versus a major hotel or a large hotel type of living. River Edge Manor is neighborhood based. We are in the South Wedge here, and programmatically we said, let's get in tune with the neighborhood. So we started doing joining neighborhood clubs. We hosted parties here, barbecues for the community. We've been involved now with the public market. Also, it is resident driven, and our residents were saying, you know, we have this all-inclusive package here, and it's what a lot of organizations offer, but we're not really interested in all of it. We want to be able to say what services we want when. So we responded to that in a very big way. And we actually changed our program to an a la carte program, which is certainly different from anything that anybody else is doing in the market. And we started promoting the boutique smallness of the community. So if you could see here, and I put this evolution of, these are direct mail pieces. Before we had these conversations, we were doing the move in without settling, which was a way to say, move in to maybe a smaller place, but you won't be settling because you're coming to this great community. I recognize now that wasn't a great slogan because it almost says move in without settling, meaning it's unsettling, perhaps, maybe, or but anyway, it's somewhat of a nondescript postcard. Once we understood what the personality of River Edge was, we moved in a different direction. The next one, this is one of our residents saying, this is senior living designed by me. That's pointing at the a la carte style of the community. And it talks about a boutique independent living community. The next is a cheers. Let's go. Let's have fun with our next chapter. And I think, at least I can see, and I hope you can see too, that there is a evolution of the look of the postcard, the life of the postcard. There's people in it, they're having fun, and they have something to say, and they're independent.
And it worked.
It did work. And so our strategy was to do direct mailers followed by social posts and digital marketing. And you see here our social reach. This is mainly Facebook, but you can see how the increases happened there and that followed our efforts. Also, our digital advertising. We see that during campaigns, when we are out there with our direct mail pieces and our social engagement and our meta ads and our display ads, when we are in campaign, there's a significant increase in traffic to our website. And ultimately, on the right side of your screen, you see in real leads here. You see that we have increased the people that are engaging with us pretty severely. I will say a caveat here is in 2020 and 2021, we have 50 inquiries per year there. I think we were low. I don't think we were that low. I think this has a lot to do with the CRM, which we're talking about later. I don't think we were capturing all our leads, but I also know there weren't over 200 of them. That's for sure. So the advertising in the campaign was working. And most of all, here's the lagging indicator of success. ultimately you see an increase in occupancy, which is what we are looking for.
And I just wanted to point out, and we'll talk again a little bit later about timing and flow and expectations, but you can see how during that assessment period, it was pretty much a low. But it took maybe about 6 months or so after that before things really started ticking up for you to get things in place and ready to run.
Yeah.
So again, there are a lot of commonalities between what Courtney and her team were experiencing in their communities and what we see other places. We started to work with Westerwood a few years ago now, and lead generation was at the top of the priority list there. And we worked with them together to come up with a very different and more fun approach to creating reasons to bring people on campus and creating events and things that people really wanted to be part of, which of course translates over and supports an overall brand perception of the community as a whole. You can see at the bottom, just within 9 months of starting this, resulted in a 10% increase in census. Another story that we're particularly proud of is St. James Place, which is a community in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And when we started with them, probably back again in late 21, moving into 22, there were a lot of challenges. And part of what you talked about, Courtney, was understanding your story. What is it that you really need to tell, and how do you communicate that? And in the work with St. James, that translated into there are a lot of misperceptions out there about the community. So we had some fun to start with, addressing those misperceptions, addressing those myths directly, to create more of a presence and awareness of the community. Then we shifted to a little more, able to tell the stories of individual people. I'm a retired minister. She's a retired teacher. If we can afford to live here, so can you. So we made it real, made it direct, and then evolved further, again, similar to Westerwood, with a series of non-traditional events, which very quickly sell out each time. Bringing well-known area professionals in various areas, from Dale Brown, the coach of the LSU basketball team, to the forensic bone anthropologist, to a writer, which positioned St. James Place as a place where you're going to live and learn, and again positions it as a much more active community. This was amazing the first time I saw these numbers, but the CEO, Dick Wager of St. James, helped pull this together for us to really look at what kind of an ROI might you be able to get from an investment in marketing. And I'm sure some of these dollars seem rather huge to some of you out there in terms of a marketing expense, but the real story is in this dollar change column of the table, where yes, there was a significantly greater investment in marketing each year of about $350,000 more than what the community had been spending. But it resulted in, on average, over this 3-year period, 13 more closings a year, basically a 65% increase in move-ins, which generated on average per year, not total, on average per year, more than $4.3 million in additional entrance fees for the community. You look at that on a year-to-year basis, the return on the investment was well over 1,000%. So pretty impressive numbers. So I know that you said, Courtney, part of your story, one of the challenges, from a leadership team perspective was, well, they're going to make recommendations and we're going to have to pay more for that. So what we often find is really helpful working with leadership teams is to say, yes, that can happen, but look at the potential return that we have out there for us if we solve this problem. So, all right. The next area that we talked about in the assessment was related to sales. And one of the findings, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up, was that because you had a process where people had more of a regional approach to sales, they supported multiple communities. They weren't just dedicated to one community. Basically, these three communities only had a fraction of a salesperson each. And we tried to show how if you could increase that staffing level and have the equivalent of a full-time person in each community, how you could substantially reduce the number of months. That's the line on the bottom here. Example, River Edge Manor, go from 17 months to rebuild Census to 8 months. Able to cut that about in half if you had the staffing that could respond more quickly to the leads as they came in. Now, I know, again, you didn't just run out and hire, a new person for each community, but you did take a hard look at how you went about staffing. And tell us that story, please.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. We were not in a position to hire another senior living consultant at that time. But the message was clear. We need more resources that are focusing efforts on the sales and marketing and the census management of each of these buildings. So what we did was the salespeople with myself created a training program that we went through with all of the EDs and all of their teams to train people on how to do tours, to know how to field a lead if one were to come in, to have a tour tree if a salesperson isn't in the building, who is next to tour somebody that might walk in. And these are practices that actually we had deployed for many years. And what happened was over time, the functions of marketing and operations started to separate a bit, in my opinion, where marketing was really doing 100% of the customer relationships. All of the touring, all of the follow-up solely was done by the marketing team with no backup. Engaging operations back into the marketing and touring was incredibly impactful because we generated excitement around it again. We had now the receptionist who would take a walk-in and do a tour and have that person move in and be so energized about it. So it ended up being more of a team building thing. And we were so lucky to have executive directors and their teams that were so willing to say, yeah, we are here to help. And we're going to invest our time into ensuring that our occupancy grows with the marketing team.
And another facet of the look at sales was, I know our team felt, you mentioned Joan Kelly Kincaid felt in looking at things that your CRM was not really enabling you to do the kind of tracking, do the kind of follow-up with prospects that is needed in a community like yours.
Yes. You know how sometimes you don't know how bad something is until you change it. That's what happened with our CRM. And it was great to have Joan. This was a non-negotiable with Joan. She said, I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do something about this. We had invested in a CRM that was a module of our EMR. It most certainly was not something that was dedicated to a marketing and customer management program for senior housing. So we took the dive and we went through the same process to vet that we went through to vet agencies. We vetted CRMs and we chose a new CRM and have implemented it. And it has been absolutely amazing. A game changer with our teams. Our salespeople are thrilled. And I almost felt badly at how much they really didn't like the old system, but they loved it. They were renewed in their jobs. My gosh, this is so easy. We can call people from our CRM. We can email out of it. We can send people invitations to events right from the CRM. It's automated. It cues our salespeople for the next steps. It saves so much time and energy. It's very intuitive. So we have our operational teams in the CRM as well, which is something that we never had before. And that has been absolutely, absolutely amazing. It's helped with our customer service greatly. We have their automatic messaging that goes out. If somebody is coming in to tour, it sends a note to the entire team that says, Mrs. Smith is about to come and tour, and here's our story. That helps us, and it's automated. We don't have to do anything. That just helps us to be more personalized in our touring. One of the things that I like about it the most is that every day there is a stand-up board, and it is sent to our CEO, our CFO, every executive director, and anybody else that wants it. Full transparency here. And we get an update of what the current census is, what the projected census is in any community, how many apartments are at risk of needing to be turned over, how many move outs are actually planned, and how many moved in. So we get a whole picture of what our census is. We, from a marketing team, are able to say, do we need to make any interventions here? Are we looking at another blip? How can we get ahead of it? And that has been, massively helped us with our marketing strategy. And it also lets leadership see, oh, wait, we're not meeting our census, but look at all this stuff that's happening. I feel comfortable. We have some reservations and all these tours are happening. So it's helpful in that kind of security. People have increased security knowing that they know what's going on from a census app without any meetings and no one having to say anything.
Right. Now, I know I said that we would hold questions until the end. I'm going to bypass that for just a second because we have a couple of people asking, what CRM did you choose?
We chose a CRM called Welcome Home. And they have been wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And I will, just a shout out to them too. Their customer service is amazing. You can chat, call, email, and their responsiveness is fantastic, which was huge for us.
That's great. Thank you. So once again, in the spirit of there's never one thing, we talked about lead generation, we talked about branding and how to tell the story, and commonalities that we run into a lot when we go into work with communities. There are more commonalities here. One of the main things we frequently see is communities not getting the most out of their CRM. It's either not the right one, as you experienced, Courtney, or it's just not being used effectively. Sometimes and this is similar to what you experienced, you didn't have the right number of people in the right positions. Now, in your case, you didn't have to hire people, you reoriented who was doing what and so forth. But there are times when we go and work with communities and say, if you're going to achieve your goal, you need another salesperson because it's not realistic to ask your existing team to do this. And of course, another thing we often run into is, are those team members in a community really trained in the latest and best practices of senior living sales? So a lot of commonalities there. All right, and again, continuing the theme of it's not one thing, oftentimes with communities, the product itself can be a hindrance to a sales and building census. And you've already basically referred to this a little bit, but I'd like to ask you, Courtney, to go maybe a little more detail on some of the product recommendations and the investment that you made there.
Sure. And I'll be quick here because I see that we're at 12:52, but Each of our communities that Tim and Joan visited needed some refresh, some more than others. And it's one thing to get people, if we're going to get more calls and we're going to get more people in, we've got to have a product that we are very, very proud of. And I think that this falls under the, you see things so often that it's okay, or you start missing it. So we've done a lot of work in every one of our communities. River Edge Manor specifically, we've done full updates to the apartments, which, as you can see, was very much needed. So on the left, you see our before. This is an example of an apartment that someone lived in for a very long time, but you can see that it's pretty outdated. And it wasn't too difficult because the life here is so good. It wasn't too difficult to rent some of these apartments when you're trying to rent 10 a year. When you're looking at needing to rent 25 with attrition, you really need to step up your game. And also the resident quality of life. They should have the best apartment that we can absolutely provide. So you can see there on the right, some changes that we made, and we tried to be as economical as we could. We did some painting of cabinets and saved in other ways, but now the apartments are presenting beautifully. And they're what the people deserve.
And once again, product issues often are ones that come up during the assessment process. An interesting mini case study here was we worked with Rivermead several years ago a couple of years back, to really focus on the one bedrooms. And that's a challenge that a lot of communities, particularly older ones, have these days. The one bedroom, one bath community is kind of become, today's equivalent of what studios were 20 or 25 years ago in independent living. And again, just quickly, there are lots of different things. We did a detailed demographic profile of who is the buyer of the one bedroom residences. What is the layout and the experience inside? How can that be modified? How do we present them? And do we have good floor plans, and are we using the latest tools to tell that story? What are important things to really think about to a buyer of a one bedroom? It's the most affordable way to get into a life plan community and get life care. That oftentimes at communities is by far the best value residents that they offer. How to stage and how to show them. And in the 2 years since our team did this assessment, Rivermead sold 8 of their one bedrooms, and only had 3 left available as of the last time we had checked with them on that. So again, a lot of things are not just, we need to advertise more and create more leads. We need to really look at what the bottom line issues are that are, creating the census challenges. So as we wrap up, Courtney, could you share some lessons learned that you've experienced through this process?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson learned was I wish that I would have reached out perhaps earlier. I think we could have saved some time, but I also don't want, hindsight is 2020. Something else that I learned was it's really important to be confident and honest and transparent when you are bringing someone in to help you. And because they're a partner, this was not a transaction that happened between Loving Company and Episcopal SeniorLife Communities. This was a true partnership. And I really appreciate that. Had I known that going in, I think I may have acted a little bit sooner. And I'm very happy that I found a true partner in Loving Company. But that relationship being really important, I don't think I understood how the impact of that relationship was going to be, and that we were going to be lifelong partners, Rob. I've often said to Joan and Tim, this is something that I intend to continue to do. this is a good idea to come in and have an agency come in when you're performing well to ensure that you're not missing anything and resting on your laurels. Because let's face it, I've been in this organization for a long time, and we were operating at 94, 96% all the time. It would have been probably a good idea to have somebody come in with that external, unbiased view then.
Thank you for sharing that. Full disclosure, I did not know Courtney was about to say the things she just did about the lifelong partnership. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I think your message is important for people. I think there are a lot of communities out there today that are maybe moving along pretty steadily at 90%, 91, 92. They look at the national data and say, okay, we're right about average, or we're slightly above average. And so we're okay with that. But yet, if they could bump their census 3 or 4%, it's millions of dollars in entrance fees and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in monthly fees that, there's potential out there for them. So thank you for sharing that. Some of the key takeaways that I wanted to share for our audience in terms of, again, some of the things to think about if you're ever in a position where you're wondering, why are we struggling in this particular area, or why is census down, or, are there other things we should be trying? Again, as we shared at the beginning, it's never just one thing. Through the course of our conversation today with Courtney, we've touched on virtually all of these: the branding expectations, the visit experience, what a residence looks like, the staffing behaviors, who's involved in marketing, who's supporting that throughout the community. Is the CRM CRM being used the way it should be? Are we getting the number of leads we should? Are we using media that we should? Things we didn't necessarily touch on today, but often come up as well, as are we utilizing our referral sources the best ways we can? Are we maximizing those really low cost referrals, lead generation options? Are there significantly greater issues with our inventory that we need to do a longer term, strategic planning analysis of, to make sure we're going to be healthy 5 and 10 years from now, not just today? And things like pricing as well. So lots of things to look at. But again, kind of going back to the beginning, one of the things is it does take challenge to invite fresh eyes into the organization, and to be willing to listen to what they share. Many of you out there may have seen this, but this is a freeze frame from the Game of Thrones series on TV many years ago, and it's gotten a lot of publicity. But here in the middle of the screen, well, not in the middle of the screen, but in the shot, there's a Starbucks cup. Starbucks was not a featured part of Westworld, whatever the place was where Game of Thrones took place. And nobody saw it there. All the professionals, the cameramen, the director, the actors, nobody saw it and realized there until after the shot was done and it was all wrapped up. That's the kind of thing that I think Courtney was sharing. There's some things that you just can't see when you're too close to them. So if you ever do look to someone to come in and bring that outside set of eyes, please be sure you're asking them to look comprehensively at all facets of the marketing program and the community. Not just, are your ads working? Is your digital media working? Is your website good? But all the different facets that influence that consumer decision, where they're going to move. And allow time. You saw with River Edge Manor in particular, Courtney and her team, they took some time to refine the messaging. They went in and worked on the product itself. So there was a several month delay before River Edge Manor started to pick back up with the census gains. But when it did, it surpassed the other two communities and did a great job. So it takes time to go through the various steps. So just allow for that in planning and expectations. With that, we're at 101. Courtney, we came in within about a minute of target. So again, thank you for all your help with this. And we do we'll look to our audience now. What questions do you have for Courtney, for me, for any of us? And we have one here to start, Courtney, and it
Mhm.
goes back to the chart that you shared at the very beginning, well, near the beginning, where you showed that overall gain in census for the communities. And the question is, I'm going to add a little more to what they wrote because I think I'm capturing the essence of it.
Mhm.
Are those year-end numbers that you shared, are they actually year-end census or are they average yearly census for each community?
Year end.
So they were year-end census. Okay, thank you.
Or actually, no, it's their actual census based on the billed days.
Oh, okay. Bill
It's yeah,
dates for the
it's
year.
not the last month of the year. That's where we were. That was for the entire year.
Mhm. All right, great, thank you. Do we have other questions for Courtney? Others of you that may have questions about an assessment process in general? Not seeing much. Just want to give a minute for others to be able to ask things. Oh, okay, here's one. Do you have a wait list? And of
We
course, you have a
do.
whole bunch of different communities. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yes, yes. We have a wait list now in all of our independent living communities. And
And
our assisted living, we are not currently running from a wait list. No. So the communities that we highlighted here, there were 2 independent and 1 assisted.
so if you don't need to remember specific numbers, but if you would look back at that 2020, 2021 time period, what kind of a wait list did you have back then? Because oftentimes one of the things we see with communities is the wait list is not really real because they have 25 openings and 75 people on the wait list. It's like, okay, why would that dynamic happen? Did you have a wait list back then, or is it something you've been able to build up since then?
Um, we had a true wait list in 2 of our communities that we didn't focus on during the assessment. These communities, we did not have a wait list. And I would say we have spent some time talking about the difference between a wait list and people who have submitted applications. And knowing that just because we have an application on file doesn't necessarily mean that someone's moving into the community. And because since we have seen our occupancy gain the way it has, another interesting shift is our waitlist management and waitlist engagement. And that is a real shift for people who were just scraping through or trying everything they could possibly do to get apartments rented, to now not have inventory and not be able to move people in right away. That's a real shift in focus, but it's a good one.
All right. Another question is, um, you had mentioned that on your CRM, the one that you had been using in the past was a module that was part of the whole EMR. Does Welcome Home integrate with your EMR?
That is a great question. It We were building an integration between Welcome Home and our current EMR. It wasn't going wonderfully. And we have not because of this, but the organization has decided to change EMRs. And the new EMR does integrate with Welcome Home. Welcome Home also integrates with our website, which is a huge time saver because so many of our leads are coming in through our website.
All right. Thank you. So what, if any, impact did content marketing have on your overall strategy to improve census? And I'm not sure if the asker of the question thinks about content marketing the same way that we do, but when we look at content marketing, it's the social media, it's that presence out there. It's also things like an automated email series. It's blogs and things that appear on the website. It's all different ways to get information about your communities out to the market. So
Mhm.
with that way of thinking about it, did content marketing play a role in your increase in census?
Absolutely. Our social media engagement, which for all intents and purposes drives traffic to our website, has been absolutely fantastic. Now we have um, I have someone here, our communications and PR coordinator who managed all that. And they understand that a little bit better than I do, I'll say. But but just based on the traffic that it has generated to our website and the number of leads coming through our website and looking at that increase, it absolutely has an impact that's undeniable. We also do have blog posts. We have to do a little bit more of that, but I think content marketing certainly plays a role.
All right, great. Thank you. Um, we have one more question now. Those of you still with us, if you've been wondering, should I ask this or not, please go ahead and ask it. We've got time. We're happy to take your questions. Um, oh, this next one is one of the favorite conversations to have with communities. Do you put your entrance and monthly fee ranges on your website? Now, I'm going to emphasize this question because I like the way they put this in there, ranges
Mhm.
on your website as opposed to just the full price list.
We do not. What is your thought on that, Rob?
Um, we definitely do not like and do not recommend putting a full price list on the website because I mean, all the reasons everybody's heard throughout the years is people don't understand, particularly if they're in the early stages looking at communities, they don't understand what's an entrance fee, what's a monthly fee. It's not the kind of way to make a purchase that you've ever done in anything else in your life. And then you get, well, what's life care? What's fee for service? What's modified? You know, how does the 50% refundable work? What's a declining balance payment? What's life? There's so many variables that people just don't understand what they're looking at. And they could look at a life care community's entrance fee and monthly fee and look at a fee for service community's entrance fee and monthly fee and go, oh, this fee for service community is so much cheaper, when in actuality, it may not be. Sorry, I'm on my soapbox. I know that.
Mhm.
So there's so many factors that we really need to educate them. That said, it is obviously something that people want. And so what we often do is put a starting at price point. Um,
Mhm.
it might be one bedroom starting at, two bedrooms starting at, a monthly fee starting at. And so it's not a whole lot of space and a whole lot of numbers, but it gives you a frame of reference and you take some of that room and you use it to start to talk about, so what does this mean? We're a life care community. This means da, da, da. Um, so um, that's our position on that. Another question is, you mentioned easy referrals. What did you mean by that? So that one's really for me. And easy may not have been the best choice of words, but there are there's a category of leads that we generally look at when we're working on a marketing plan that is the low cost leads. They tend to be easier from the perspective of a conversion from a lead into a resident. They have a much higher conversion rate, maybe 10% conversion rate of lead to move in versus say a digital media ad or even a direct mail uh, you know lead that came from direct mail, because they tend to come through these categories of referrals, categories of low cost leads are referrals, resident referrals, family referrals, staff referrals, the resident referrals obviously being key. Because if you move in and you can get your friends introduced to the community, that's the best form of marketing we can do. But there are all these other lead sources for communities that basically reflect word of mouth. Signage. Oh, I've driven by your community for years. Well, that means been a brand awareness there, things like that. So really trying to maximize referrals, those low cost leads, because an average cost per sale for a referral based lead, you might be looking at 100 or 200 dollars on average. An average cost per sale for a lead that was created through print advertising, it might be $50,000, because of the low response rates and low conversion rates. So the more we can focus on generating leads at communities through these low cost methods, the less they're going to have to invest in the higher cost advertising. A follow-up question on that: what percentage of conversions typically come from existing resident referrals? Honestly, I'm a little more familiar with this total category of low-cost referrals that I'm looking at. Ideally, we would like to see 60 to 65% of sales come from those kinds of referrals, so that we're only looking for about a third of our sales to come from things that we have to put a greater investment into. If we go into a community and only 45 or 50% of their sales are coming from these referral and other low-cost leads sources, then that's often an indication that there may be a reputation challenge that needs to be addressed and worked on, as well as just encouragement of positive reviews, review generation, and really doing other forms of reputation management. So of that 60%, 65%, what proportion of that might specifically be existing residents? I'm going to go out on a limb and say maybe a quarter to a third of that total may actually come from the existing residents, which might be somewhere in the ballpark of 20% of total community move-ins. There's a range around that, of course, depending on the communities. And I'm kind of having a dialogue with one person here on all this right now. And I think he just politely said, "Rob, can you take a break for a minute and let Courtney talk to this question?" So tell us about your experience with this.
Yeah. So in resident referrals, we typically do have a conversion rate of about 70% of our move-ins that are referred by friends and families. They are always our strongest. Something that I will be very honest about, in one of the communities, and it actually was River Edge, there was a lack of resident referrals. So we saw a decrease. Not only were they not converting, we weren't getting them. And that was a big flag. It was a big red flag, and something that we really needed to dig into. And it said a lot. It said a lot. And now it's back up. We actually have had 2 groups of sisters move in, focusing on that. The quality experience and the environment is critical, because those are the best mouthpieces out there. The best referral sources are the residents.
Yep, absolutely. All right, we don't have any more questions there. So Courtney, thank you so much once again for all the time you've taken to help pull this information together, to help put the webinar together, to be here today. We really appreciate you supporting us and supporting the field by sharing your insights and experiences with others in the field that may be facing similar challenges. So thank you again. And thank you to everyone out there that joined us today. We hope you've taken something useful away. And we look forward to having you join us on our next webinar. More to come on that in the next few weeks. All right, take care, everybody.